Excellent connection, they say. We're live. Look at what we have here. Let's Toast Media, go blue. Michigan. Zach Scout, go green. Owen Walker, Husker, power. Well, speaking of the Huskers, they have a chance to show their power against Illinois this week, and it is Michigan State week. Or Michigan State hate week, if I'm a Michigan fan, but this is not a preview prediction segment by any stretch of the imagination. This is reacting to week 8, talking a little bit about week 9, as we're going to talk about, odds to win the Big Ten and such, but, yeah, it's just doing well overall. So, yeah, let's get right into it, honestly. Amazing. I'm here. I'm glad that you're here. I'm really, really glad. Really glad that you're here. So yeah, just looking at everything, and, Miami just had a terrible outing. Absolutely terrible outing against Duke. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some impressive wins. And first, we'll talk about 2022 Big Ten championship game odds. That's what we'll talk about first. Honest to goodness. Megan, go Badgers. Portal of Wisdom, go Big Red. Chasp, no way Michigan lets Tucker roll again, even though it would be cool to see as an Ohio State fan. Oh, Chasp, believe me, there's a chance. Not a very good chance, but there's a chance. Sean, you say go Buckeyes. I cannot say that back. That'd be a cardinal sin. Wow, we already have 20 concurrent viewers. Let's get right into it after I answer a few more comments for just another minute. XTR Legend, you think Michigan will attempt to run up the score against MSU? If they are in a position to do so, absolutely. It seems to be the feeling that I'm getting from this Michigan team. Absolutely. Megan, Iowa's offense is terrible. I absolutely concur. I mean, they had, 6 turnovers against Ohio State? That game in and of itself was absolutely disgusting. Hey, Denon, how are you doing? Yeah, okay. Let's get right into it. And first and foremost, let's actually talk about Miami, since Amazing brings it up. I didn't watch football last weekend because I was busy. Duke versus Miami was a debacle. It was an absolute debacle. 45-21. 45-21. Duke had 2 turnovers. Miami had 8 of them. 8 turnovers. Not in 2 games or 3 games. Not 5 turnovers, not 6, not 7. They had 8 turnovers. Duke had 336 yards to Miami's 327. That was a bad football game. That was terrible. And I watched some highlights of it, really just wanted to see what happened with all those turnovers, and they were ridiculous. I mean, in one position, Garcia, when he threw the pick 6, he was throwing it to nobody but the defense. Like, that was the only option, was to throw it to the defense, and that's exactly what he did. Miami at one point in this game had an 87.5% chance to win when they were up 7-0 after a Colby Young 7-yard pass from Tyler Van Dyke. Duke went on a 17-0 scoring run. Miami then went on a 14-0 scoring run to take the lead by 4 in the third quarter. And then Duke went on oh my goodness, this is astonishing. Duke went on a 28 unanswered points, 28-0 run, and won 45-21. It's just absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy, yeah. Full Metal Pilot, I had Miami being a division and conference title contender, as did I. And they're 3-4, 1-2 in conference. Go away. That's all I have to say to Miami. go away. It's the same thing with Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher, which if you have not watched the video already, let me pull it up for you all and just put it in the chat. Jimbo Fisher is 3-4. Him and Mario Cristobal both look, to a certain degree, completely gassed, completely dead. Their programs are in peril. Really the big difference between the two is Mario's in year one. Miami had no mental toughness instilled before he came, so it's going to be a rebuild. Here's the issue, though. For Jimbo Fisher, you're in year 5. Thank you, PoyGFBQ32. Thank you for the $5. Love the Big Ten coverage. Keep it up, and I will do so. Here's the video. I'm posting it in the chat. It's the link to the Texas A&M video. They're an absolute dumpster fire right now. Jimbo Fisher is clueless. Mario Cristobal is clueless. The fact that this was a top 25 matchup and that College Game Day went to it is a sin. A sin. The ultimate sin. Miami's 1-2 in conference. Texas A&M is 1-3. They're both 3-4. By all means, more likely A&M than Miami because they play in a much tougher conference. These two teams could finish under 500. Both of them. Both. It's crazy. Dan Lanning, and who else besides Dan Lanning, Sonny Dykes, and there's one, and Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly. Amazing hires. Absolutely amazing. Sonny Dykes is undefeated. Lincoln Riley just has one loss to a really good Utah team. Oregon has one loss to the current reigning national champion, Georgia Bulldogs. And the other coach that I mentioned, I've already forgotten his name. It's Sonny Dykes, Dan Lanning, Lincoln Riley, and let me check the chat if any of you remember. It just slipped my mind. Not even kidding you. There's a fourth coach that's doing Brian Kelly. Yeah, Brian Kelly has 2 losses, one to Florida State, which is a loss that isn't good, but it's not in conference, so it doesn't entirely matter, since it's his first year, not trying to go on a national title run. And his only other loss is to Tennessee, who, as I'm concerned, or as far as I'm concerned, is the best, or the second best, or at worst, the third best coach, not coach, team in the SEC. And thank you, Kevin Pert, Brian Kelly. Thank you as well. Oh, Marcus Freeman, another dud so far this year. Not saying they're going to be duds forever, but Marcus Freeman, dud. Mario Cristobal, dud. Jimbo Fisher, known dud. It's why I didn't have him in my top 25 to begin the season. They're 3-4. I don't understand how anyone thought it was a top 10 team. Now, granted, as I said in that Texas A&M video, I had Nebraska in the top 10. So I can't talk. At the same time, though, I accepted at multiple points when I made that prediction that I could be totally wrong. That was a bold take, and somewhat of a hot take. A take that, to a certain degree, had more of a chance of failing than succeeding. Everyone, mostly everyone, I don't want to make generalizations here, but most people and analysts picked Texas A&M to be an amazing team. They're not. They're the Iowa of the SEC. They're Iowa with more talent, which is why the only reason they have a better offense. They might as well have Brian Ferentz as their OC, but with more talent so the offense plays better, and they have a worse defensive coordinator. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing if you're Texas A&M? I have absolutely no clue. Amazing. The Big Ten, there is a part of me that does think that they're overrated, but at the same time, there's a part of me that doesn't, and I don't know which. We'll have to wait until the preseason. I actually happen to think that Illinois is kind of what LSU is right now. They lost to a team that's obviously inferior to them early in the year, and they've matured, and they're now peaking, like what LSU is. The chat's having a lot of activity, so I'm going to answer it, and then we'll talk a little bit more maybe about Miami, Texas A&M, or Notre Dame. Notre Dame gave David Shaw his first, I think, Power 5 win in, I don't know how long, like his first road Power 5 win in years. So there's that too. Jimbo's buyout is $85 million. Actually, if you round it up, it's $86 million. And I only say that just to add to the... It's ridiculous. Why would anyone's buyout be $86 million? Why? Second-year head coaches, Shane Beamer, doing well. Steve Sarkisian, the jury is still out on him. They could have a terrible run at the end of the year. Heupel's doing well. Malzahn seems to be doing well, even though they just had a bad loss. Harsin is going to be fired. They're going to be fired at the end of... He's going to be fired and out by the end of the year. Exactly, Jack. He just said what I was saying. Did Kenneth Walker make Mel Tucker rich? The answer to that, I want to see how Michigan State finishes out the end of the year, and I want to see them play one more year, but the answer is looking more likely to be yes than no, because Kenneth Walker, Mike Valenti put it perfectly on his show today. He looks exactly like he did in college in the NFL, which just proves how elite of a player he was. Kenneth Walker would literally, in the Michigan State game from last year, he would run into his own O-line, realize there are no holes, I will be tackled for a negative 1 yard gain, and then he proceeds to run backwards around his O-line, find a hole, and sprint, and no one can catch him. Like, he truly is fantastic. Absolutely is fantastic. Okay, we'll move on from Duke versus Miami. It's ACC football. Miami, I don't even... I don't know what to say. When you lose by 24 points to Duke in football, moment of silence. Okay, we're done. We're done with that. We're done with that. Let's talk about the Big Ten. Let's absolutely talk about the Big Ten and their championship odds. Okay, 2022 Big Ten championship odds. Ohio State is at negative 500. Michigan's at plus 400. Illinois is at plus 800. Purdue and Penn State are at plus 200. Not 200, plus 2,000. Nebraska's at plus 7,500. And anyone who wasn't named is at plus 15,000 or higher. Really, this race is viewed... Ohio State at minus 500. That's, really. Ohio State far and away is the favorite to win. According to odds, Ohio State is in its own category. Michigan and Illinois are closer together than Michigan and OSU are by that odds category, which I personally disagree with. But I think there could be a logical argument to that to a certain degree, especially since Ohio State and Michigan could be the slightly better team by an inch or two, and Ohio State has home field advantage, and home field advantage more than makes up for an inch or two, especially in an environment like the shoe. So home field advantage plus the fact that Ohio State's a better team equals the chasm in odds between Ohio State minus 500, Michigan plus 400. Penn State at plus 2,000. That just shows that, again, they have to face Ohio State and they have to face Maryland. And they beat Purdue, who's at plus 2,000. But Purdue, even with 5 losses, only 2 of them being in conference, has a better path. Much easier path than Penn State does to get to Indy. Illinois, they play at Michigan. That's like the only game in which they will probably be an underdog. They already played Wisconsin. They already played Minnesota. They already played Iowa. They beat all of them. Those 3 were supposed to be the 3 toughest teams this year, according to most people. Maybe Minnesota be the 4th toughest team, and you tab Purdue at 3rd. All they have to play is they have to play Purdue. If they beat Purdue, they can afford to lose a game, unless it's to Nebraska, because then tiebreakers and all that stuff will happen. Illinois is favored by about a touchdown against Nebraska. And we'll talk about that Thursday at 7 when I have my live then. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's Ohio State. Michigan is trailing, not close behind them, but they're trailing. They're in a distant second. Illinois in an even more distant third. It's really those three, because then it just drops off. Purdue, Penn State. It drops off even further to Nebraska. Nebraska, they're 3-4, but 2 of those losses were to out-of-conference opponents. Another one of those losses was to Northwestern, who is 1-6. They're going to have a losing record. No need to worry about a tiebreaker there. The Purdue loss hurts even more, though, because Nebraska was in that game. They lost by 6. They covered the spread in that game, and Trey Palmer just went off. If Nebraska somewhat, not entirely, but they control enough of their own destiny to where they can realistically make it to Indy. They'll lose to Michigan, but if they win every other game, and, that includes beating up Illinois, and other things happen, Nebraska can find themselves in Indy. It's unlikely, but it's more possible than Minnesota and Wisconsin. That I believe in, because Wisconsin has lost to Michigan State. Wisconsin and Minnesota have lost 3 conference games. 3 of them. Maryland at plus 30,000, they have 2 conference losses. One's to Michigan. Even if they were to win out, like Ohio State or Michigan, one of them will probably just have 1 loss and still go to Indy ahead of Maryland. So that really is that. Let's answer some things in the chat. Where is Purdue if they beat Penn State? Well, Penn State would be effectively out of the race. Purdue would be 6-2. Their 2 losses would be to Syracuse and to Wisconsin. Purdue would be tied for first in the West, and the winner of the Purdue-Illinois game would go to Indy. Purdue having that extra conference loss is what gives Nebraska some hope, and it gives Illinois, and it honestly gives Illinois somewhat of a cushion, too, to fall back on. So, yeah. Hi, Tyler. Jack Harrington. Sam, the Big Ten this year looks like the 70s Big Ten when it was just Ohio State versus Michigan. Yep. That really is what it is, though. Illinois, I'll tell you, as a Michigan fan, that game, I'm circling that game because it's before Ohio State. If Illinois enters that game with 1 loss, it's not going to help Illinois because they'll be ranked, they'll be high profile, but if they enter with 2 or 3 losses, which is, it's possible, very possible, then that could be the ultimate trap game for Michigan. Illinois is a tough defense. They have a good run game. They have a very underrated pass game with Tommy DeVito and Isaiah Williams. That's right. That's the week before Michigan travels to Ohio State. The week before. So, I just look at, these odds, and it is Ohio State and Michigan's race. And I do think still that those are the 2 best teams in the country. Thank you, Tyler, for the $2. I'm having today's been very tiring, so I will admit I'm having a below average bad day. Only got 5 hours of sleep, but the stream's doing well. Outside of me being tired, I'm doing, I'd say, above average to okay. So, yeah, it is what it is. Thank you for the $2. Do you think Michigan can stop Ohio State's offense? Given the Iowa game, I am inclined to say yes. Not stop the offense, but they can limit it. The Iowa game told me that Michigan can use the exact same game plan they did last year, mainly because they also have better players, and they can beat Ohio State using that game plan. Michigan has better offensive players to where if the defense falters and they don't get the same pressure that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo did, it won't be as much of a problem because you have J.J. McCarthy, you have a better offensive line, you have better wide receivers, and your running back room is improved in explosivity, which means this Michigan offense is much more potent and will score more points than last year's Michigan team against the same opponent. The defense is pretty darn similar. I think this Michigan team and this Michigan State game, mean, Michigan State plays us close or beats us. If they play us close, you could dismiss it because it is a rivalry game. If they beat us or if it comes down to the wire, maybe I am wrong, but I have a real sense, not just a gut feeling, but a feeling based off of, looking at this offense, looking at efficiency metrics, looking at football power index, that this Michigan team is better equipped to win it all than last year's Michigan team. And it's the same thing with Ohio State. Both of these teams, Michigan and OSU, both teams that participate in the game, could be the game of the century this year. Both of them are improved, much improved, compared to last season. They're both better teams. Alabama, I don't know if they're worse or better. I'm inclined to say about the same. Georgia's worse. Tennessee's better, but they're not at the level that 2021 Georgia was. I mean, if the Big Ten wants to win it this year, go out and win it. I mean, Michigan and OSU are the two best teams in the country, and at minimum, they're both top 4 or top 5 teams. Ohio State seems to get judged harder than Michigan. Michigan won by far less against Iowa than Ohio State, but all I heard is how good Michigan looked and how bad Ohio State played against Iowa. There is some fairness to that. However, I will say Michigan played in Kinnick, which is harder. Iowa played a worse game. They somehow managed to play a worse game offensively, like a far worse game offensively against OSU than Michigan. Michigan looked cleaner. They looked more disciplined. Ohio State, let me tell you what that game told me, Chasp. Ohio State has the higher ceiling than Michigan, but they have the lower floor. Michigan is more stable than Ohio State is, and that's my opinion. That's my opinion. I think that Ohio State is the higher ceiling, and right now they're the better team. They do, though, have the lower floor than Michigan does. They're not as stable, and I think that Iowa game showed that. Like, you literally had multiple turnovers and a pick six gifted to you in that first half, and you were up by 16 at halftime, which it sounds like, that's a lot, but Iowa has no offense. You yourself, referencing to OSU fans, surrendered a defensive touchdown and another turnover, a pick by Stroud, which Michigan never surrendered. So the transitive property isn't, I think it can be used to a certain degree, but it's not the only thing you can use. You have to use other metrics, and all other metrics point to the fact that Ohio State's the better team. Factoring in the transitive property, I think Ohio State showed some weakness there on offense, but they showed strengths on defense too. I mean, they forced 6 turnovers. Eichenberg got a pick 6. They shut down Iowa. I mean, honestly, it's just my opinion. Wolf 58, good to see you in here. Still got lots of football to be played. Don't get too high on those Michigan fumes. Don't worry. I'm not placing them at number 1 unless Ohio State loses or begins to play a ton of close games. College football with Sam, any scenario where Ohio State and Michigan play again in the playoffs? Absolutely. And like Georgia, Alabama, the College Football Playoff Committee will guarantee that the only time they could face off again would be the national title game. National title game. That'd be the only place that they could meet up in. All right, so talked about that, the race for the Big Ten title, Miami being horrible. Let's finish off this with some impressive wins. We'll brush over Iowa, OSU, Clemson, Syracuse, UCLA, Oregon, LSU and Ole Miss, and Texas versus Oklahoma State. I'm covering Syracuse and Clemson in a video tomorrow, at least I think I am. So I'm just going to brush over that in anticipation that I'll cover it tomorrow. And I've already covered Iowa versus Ohio State, so I'll brush over that. Same with Penn State and Minnesota. So, Syracuse versus Clemson. Clemson 27, Syracuse 21. Syracuse led 21-10 at the half. Clemson wanted a 17-0 scoring run in the fourth quarter to come back and win by 6. They had 450 total yards, 4 turnovers, but they held Syracuse to 291 yards and 1 turnover. In Syracuse, this game and the win probability chart will show it too, reminded me of Iowa versus Penn State from last year, where Clemson, using an intimidating environment and a superior coaching staff, slightly, not too much of a superior coaching staff, specifically superior defensive coaching staff or superior head coach, eventually wore down Syracuse and eventually broke them. And in that sense of the analogy, I don't think Clemson's a playoff team because they beat an undefeated Syracuse. My top 25, which will release tomorrow, tabs Clemson at 7th. They could go 13-0, and with, their strength of schedule, their resume, and I honestly think that they'll lose at least one game still, despite the fact that they only have 4, more likely than not 5 left to play. I don't know. I don't like Clemson. They remind me of a better version of 2014 FSU, and even though that they're better than that team, a better edition of 2014 FSU would still get blown out in the playoffs. I don't think Clemson's a playoff team. Garrett Schrader outplayed DJ Uiagalelei, and at the end of the day, it was Will Shipley for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns that won Clemson the game. Iowa versus Ohio State. Ohio State 54, Iowa 10. Oh boy. Well, Ohio State scoring 54 points on Iowa's defense is just crazy, even if it was throughout 4 quarters. So kudos to Jim Knowles there. Kudos. Honestly, kudos to Ohio State there. And CJ Stroud, he went, I think, 20 of 30 for 286 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. What a job by him. And Julian Fleming had 2 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Ohio State just is rolling through everyone. They're peaking right now. And Jim Knowles' defense and the offense are both peaking at the same time. Big game, though. A game that's going to be underrated and overlooked at Penn State this weekend, which is sadly a noon game. Penn State should have had that as the whiteout, because that is... If Penn State had a whiteout, an early preview of my prediction for that game, if they had a whiteout, it'd be a totally different ball game. Noon game, Penn State has a very little, if any, chance to win that game. Gave Ohio State a large advantage by making it a noon game. Okay, speaking of Penn State versus Minnesota. Penn State 45, Minnesota 17. It was 45. No, it was 38-10 at the end of the third quarter. At that point, the game is effectively over, and then each team traded a TD in the fourth. Penn State only outgained Minnesota by 139 total yards. Each had 1 turnover. Penn State had 8 more first downs, and Minnesota actually had 3 more minutes of TOP. It really was that Minnesota was 2 of 13 on third down, 2 of 3 on fourth down. Penn State was 5 of 11 on third down and 1 of 1 on fourth down. Penn State ran the ball more effectively, 1.5 yards per carry more than Minnesota. They passed the ball for 1.2 yards more than Minnesota did, and Penn State had half the penalties. They had 4 penalties to Minnesota's 8. That, and the whiteout, decided this game. This was a blowout. Blowout in favor of Penn State, and I thought that Penn State was going to cover. I thought that Penn State was going to win. This is a statement win, though. Even though it's a Minnesota team without Tanner Morgan, they had a backup QB in, a limited Minnesota team, it's still 45-10. It's a blowout. And Minnesota in 2016, they get housed by Michigan and Ann Arbor. They return home and beat Minnesota. And then they beat Ohio State, who is number 2. And they go on to win the Big Ten. It's the same setup here. The only question is, and the only difference is, there's no whiteout against Ohio State. And the other difference is Penn State here, if they beat OSU and win out, that's the disadvantage, is there's no whiteout. The advantage here is you never lost to a non-conference team early in the year. So if Penn State wins out, you're not going to be missing the playoff like you did in 2016. You'll be in it. Do I think you'll win it? No, I don't think this team is equipped to win a playoff game. But you'll be in it. You'll have won 2 conference titles under James Franklin. Just think about that. Even though it isn't, it doesn't look to be very possible. It could happen. It's still possible. Still possible. Absolutely so. Oregon, UCLA. Oregon 45, UCLA 30. I had faith in Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet, and it was misplaced because honestly, I want Oregon to lose more so than I wanted UCLA to win. That affected my prediction in a very negative way. And Oregon housed UCLA 45-30. At some point, the game was 45-23 before Jake Bobo and Dorian Thompson-Robinson connected to score a garbage time touchdown. So 15-point win for the Ducks. Bo Nix went 22 of 28 for 283 yards. He has the 6th best QB rating in the nation and a 165.9 passer rating. Oregon had 545 total yards of offense. I mean, they're crazy efficient. They have the 4th best efficient offense in the country. They're 8th overall in efficiency. They're 13th overall in football power. They're a unit. If Tanner Morgan plays against Penn State, do the Lions get something exposed we didn't see Saturday? Probably not. Minnesota probably would have had another touchdown, maybe another field goal or another touchdown on top of that previous touchdown, but I think Penn State still would have won that game, if I'm being honest there. Then we have Ole Miss versus LSU. LSU 45, Ole Miss 20. LSU went on a 42-3 scoring run. That's unfathomable. Jaden Daniels led the team in rushing with 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. He led the team in passing with 248 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels now is top 15 in QBR. Jaden Daniels has been more consistent since early in the year, like Josh Pate was saying on his video that I watched about this game earlier today. Crazy. LSU could beat Alabama. Not saying they will. LSU is a bye week before that happens, but it's possible. It's absolutely possible that Alabama could come into Tiger Stadium, and if the right LSU team shows up and Bama struggles per usual, you could see a 2010-like scenario where a head coach who is known to be inferior to Nick Saban, as Les Miles was, has a team that is better equipped than the greatest of all-time coach and beats him in Death Valley. It's very possible. I mean, this Bama team looks like they could lose 2 or 3 games. And this LSU team looks like they look like they could win out. Probably wouldn't beat Georgia or Tennessee, but they could win out the regular season, go 11-3 with a nice New Year's Six Bowl win. It's possible. Certainly. LSU had 500 total yards of offense to Ole Miss's 404. Ole Miss had 1 turnover. Ole Miss was 1 of 2 on 4th down. Ole Miss ran it. They're a run-heavy team. They only ran it for 3.2 yards per carry, and they were 20 of 35 in passing. So that about summarizes it. And then Texas, ESPN's FPI has them at 6th. Don't listen to them. Just don't do it. I mean, Texas was decently high last season. I think they finished in the top 25 when they were 5-7. Granted, Nebraska was 3-9 and pretty close too. It's crazy. Texas is 5-3, 3-2 in conference. They led until 8:38 in the 4th quarter. They were favored to win the game. And then they bounced back, and then late collapse against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State outscored them 14-0 in the 4th quarter to win the game. Mental toughness, superior head coaching, and better development by, I don't know what those weird symbols were, but I just felt like moving my body. Mike Gundy, big win. Oklahoma State 6-1. They gained bowl eligibility. Texas is still searching for bowl eligibility. They had 3 turnovers. Quinn Ewers threw 3 picks. He was 19 of 49. His QBR is now 21st in the country. In that specific game, he had a 94 passer rating and a 47 QBR. Pretty terrible numbers. And Oklahoma State's given up better numbers than that to several of the quarterbacks they've played. But just fantastic game overall by Oklahoma State. Mental toughness is key. And it's why I like college football. It'd be good to see Texas do well, I don't know if they're back just yet. I kind of proclaimed in one of my last live streams that I thought they were at 5-2, but this game sort of has my mind changed. Possibly. But that's why you don't make bold proclamations and statements of fact until the end of the year. So I'm going to try and contain myself and wait to do that. And that right there is where I'm going to end the video, guys, for tonight. Thank you for the $7 chat, for the 24 likes, and the 60 concurrent viewers. Please like this live stream and share it around before you click off. I absolutely love you guys. I like listening to the College Football Samcast, and I love producing it. Amazing. You all have a great night, and I will talk to you guys Thursday live at 7 Eastern Time, and you'll be seeing videos made from me as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.